I have new neighbors. They bought the old Henderson house located on the neighboring road. They were rumored to be Yankees, and no one knew anything about them. Apparently, they were quite prosperous. The Hendersons had a two-story house, a barn, outbuildings, and 212 acres of land. The farm was a good one until Mr. Henderson grew old. His daughters moved away, and there was no one to run the farm, so he put it up for sale and moved farther south. This made the girls angry. They were afraid he would spend their inheritance before he died. He was of sound mind and body, so there was nothing they could do about it. I thought it was funny. I never liked girls. I secretly agreed with my aunt when she snorted and said they were showing off too much to be decent. That's old Southern snob speech. I met them by accident. Her car, a Cadillac, was parked on the curb, steam coming from under the hood. I pulled over. That's what neighbors do. She must have seen too many redneck horror movies because she didn't open the door or roll down the window, just stared at me with eyes bordering on panic. It was raining and getting colder, so I got back in my truck and drove away. Once I got to the top of Henderson Hill, I called the sheriff's department and told them what had happened. Everyone knows you have to get to the top of the hill to get a signal. Until then, you're in a dead zone. At least that's what the locals think. Well, damn it, Will. Why didn't you help her? They were our county police, to protect and serve unless it was too hot, too cold, raining, or a game was in progress. In other situations, they were the Johnny on the spot. I tried. Wendell, she wouldn't open the door. I can't just leave her there. Get out and do something. Okay, let me find my slicker. Have you noticed it's raining? Yeah, and it's cold. Besides, it's already dark and she's probably scared to death, so hurry up. If you hurry, I have leftover barbecue from the Democrat rally. You can take it to the station. There's buns and lettuce. You can take them with you. Do you have any baked beans or potato salad? Take your time, Wendell. If you hurry, I might be persuaded to give up a couple slices of greasy pie. All right, no offense. I'll be there in about 10 minutes. Does this cake have frosting? 20 minutes later, he met me and we drove back down the hill. She was still there, crying. Wendell identified himself and she rolled down the window. Ma'am, do you need help? Yes, please. Smoke billowed from under the hood and the car stalled. I couldn't get in touch with anyone. It's a good thing you found me. I wasn't the one who found you, ma'am. Will was. Why don't you open the lock and let him look under the hood? He wasn't a bad mechanic. I wasn't a bad mechanic until everything became computerized. Now you needed a PhD from MIT to do it, or you were out of a job. I couldn't afford the new equipment, so I stopped. It was a hobby anyway, not a way to make a living. It took about 2 seconds to see the problem. The lower radiator hose was ruptured. Heck, it had always been the bottom one. You need a new radiator hose, ma'am. Call AAA when Wendell drives you home, and they'll come and pick it up. It's easy to fix. They should be done before lunch. Not today. Billy's out of town, remember? His daughter is getting married on Sunday. He won't be back until Tuesday. Wendell looked a little too happy saying that. She panicked again. I can't just leave him here. My husband would kill me. I stared at Wendell, watching the gears of his little brain turn. Don't say it. Don't say it, damn it. He said it. Hey, Will, why don't you take one of your heavy trailers and move this for her? It was late. It was cold. It was raining. And I was late for dinner. But you can't leave your neighbors, especially frightened women, in the lurch. I guess we can. I'll take it to my lot and leave it behind the fence for safekeeping. Then whoever fixes it won't have to run after him to do it. Will that be all right with you? Thanks, we'll pay what you charge. Take me home, officer. She said officer like it was something better than God, and Wendell couldn't get the door open fast enough. Then there was a crackle in the radio. A crash on Highway 12. He was the closest. Damn this rain. Sorry, ladies. Will will pick you up and I gotta go. Will, don't eat that kebab. I'll come back later. Sure, I'll put it in the fridge at the store. You know where the keys are. Lock it behind you this time. I don't need the cat having kittens again. You're never going to let me forget that, are you? Not as long as the smell holds. Mrs. Hatfield, are you ready? She finally gave her name, and I decided that if the cop vouched for me, I really wasn't a serial homicidal maniac preying on older, attractive Yanks. She still sat as far away from me as possible. Along with her husband, she owned the Henderson house. When we pulled up to the house, there were no lights on in the house. Why aren't the lights on? Because the power went out. Didn't you notice how dark it was for the last mile? What am I supposed to do? Do you have a flashlight, lanterns, and the like? Not that I know of. Well, Ms. Hatfield, if you're going to live in the village, it's not a bad investment. Mr. Henderson had a generator in the store. Is it still there? I don't know. We haven't had time to look for it yet. Well then, put on your adventurer's hat. If it's still there, that means it's plugged in. She was lucky. The car was in place and running, but barely. The big diesel unit was making an infernal humming noise within the walls of the building. It had enough fuel for about 4 hours. If it stays on, it'll be fine until the power comes back on. They don't usually shut it off for long this time of year. If I were you, I'd adjust the thing and invest in a barrel of diesel, just in case. She nodded furiously, making notes in her clipboard. I'm going to go get your car now. Here's my card with the license plate number. If you need anything before your husband gets back, call me. Your car will be parked in my lot. The address is on the card. Good night, Mrs. Hatfield. I can't thank you enough. Don't worry about it. Good night. After making sure she was safe, I left, calling Sherry, knowing I'd get a barrage of shit. Where have you been? Why didn't you call? No, you're fine. No, I missed you. I appealed to her tender feelings. Sorry, babe. I got a call from the police. Billy's away for the weekend and they asked me to pick up the car from the curb. I'll be home in an hour and a half. Something that I hope you squeeze the shit out of them for making you work in this weather. I'll get mine, don't worry. It was all about the money. I didn't realize that her parents were pretty well off and I was doing okay. As far as I knew, she'd never needed anything, but the way she acted, you'd think we were living in poverty. She hadn't been like this until about a year ago. I always wondered what set her off. I picked up the trailer, took the car, and was home when I promised. She had already gone to bed, leaving me a note that dinner was in the microwave. A quick snack, a quick shower, and I was dead to the world until my alarm clock rang. The next day turned out to be sunny and warm, making me forget about the cold rain the day before. There was nothing for me to do at the store, so I drove to Advance, bought a hose, rolled my car off the trailer, and fixed it. It was lunchtime, and a man in his late 40s walked into the office wearing a suit, tie, polished fingertips, and a concerned expression. I'm Bennett Hatfield. I'm here to arrange to have my wife's car towed to the garage. Could you tell me the best mechanic in town? He was talking to Charlie, my assistant and senior coworker. He, Bobby, and Myra were my coworkers and friends. I was in the equipment rental business, backhoes, bulldozers, tractors, ditch diggers, and the like. It was good business. No one was going to give $29,000 or more for an excavator to do a few hours of work when you could rent one for a few hundred. The economic downturn actually helped my business. More and more people were doing things themselves rather than hiring labor. My appliances were not known for their beauty, but they were all serviceable mechanically, and dirt didn't care if you had new paint. I took a little less than the chains, and it worked out. Charlie pointed at me and walked over. He held out his hand. Bennett Hatfield. I couldn't help but smirk. Will McCoy. Myra was standing behind us. She usually handles costumes, and she figured he'd come to rent something from our party supplies department. She burst into laughter. He frowned. I'm sorry, Mr. Hatfield. We're not laughing at you. We're laughing at Hatfield and McCoy. He froze for a moment, then smiled back. I hope we won't be feuding. I left my shooting iron in Philadelphia. Good. I melted mine into a plowshare. What can I do for you? I'm here to arrange to have my wife's car towed to the garage. I don't know anyone in town. Can you recommend someone? Don't bother. I had some free time this morning and I fixed her up. All it needs is a new hose and some antifreeze. Bring your wife anytime before 6 and she can drive it home. He looked surprised. Well, all right. How much do I owe you? $40. The check for the hose and antifreeze is on the dashboard. That's not right. Yes, that's right. Check the receipt. No, I meant how much does your work cost? Oh, I can't charge you. I don't make a living as a mechanic and that wouldn't be right. We are neighbors. I live on Howell Road and you on Henderson Road. Our houses are practically next door to each other. It's not customary here to charge your neighbors for kindness. It's just not customary. He looked puzzled, and I tried to explain. If you wanted to rent a backhoe, I would have charged you money. Your wife told me you're a lawyer, so if I asked you for legal help, I would expect you to charge me money. But if I asked if I could borrow a tool, or if you needed a ride somewhere, if you were offered money, someone would take offense. Do you understand? He nodded. I guess so. It just takes a little getting used to. Well, I can't thank you enough. He returned 45 minutes later with his wife. She was more attractive than I'd anticipated, and younger, but not enough to be a trophy wife. 40 maybe, but she looked about 30. I guess a life of luxury isn't as grueling as working for a living. Her husband had just left her, too busy with his legal affairs, I suppose. She thanked me repeatedly for my help until I finally asked her to stop. That's enough, Miss Hatfield. It's no big deal. It might be here, but where I come from, it's pretty noticeable. And since we're neighbors, call me Angie. She held out her hand. Will, and this is Myra and Charlie. They were practically breathing down my neck trying to find out more about her. She smiled, shook their hands, and instead of leaving, she asked Myra to give her a tour, stopping and looking at various pieces of equipment and asking a million questions. She especially liked the party supplies and rentals, especially the castle. The castle was a circus tent with turrets and flags. It could be divided into different-sized rooms if needed. It was very popular for weddings. It was once a real circus tent, but the circus closed down, and I got it for almost nothing at an auction. With it, and a few smaller marquees, I could turn a field into a fairy tale in 24 hours. Sherry was on a roll again. She wanted a new car, a Cadillac like our new neighbor had. Her Chevrolet Impala that she had to buy 2 years ago was no longer satisfactory. I tried to remind her that if we bought the car, she could only turn it in after 4 years. Only then would I agree to buy it, she said mockingly. This thing is almost worn out. It had 39,000 miles on it. I need a new car. Why are you arguing with me? Because you don't need a new car. You just want one. We can't keep up with the neighbors, Sherry. He's a lawyer, for goodness sake. Your car will do just fine. If you don't think so, you can buy it yourself, as long as it doesn't have my name on the paperwork. I had her. Her credit history was terrible. While we were dating, she had defaulted on a car loan and several credit card debts. I helped her get her car back, but wouldn't help her with the credit card. She refused to pay it off. I don't believe in credit cards. They are a trap and a waste of money. But you have two. That's right, and both are business-related. The American Express I use only as needed, and the other one I use twice a year, just to keep it active. I use them if I find a good deal on equipment, and that's it. I made her sign a prenup to exclude my house and business from the community property. My parents owned the house, and when they retired, they went to my sister's in California, fell in love with it, and moved out, leaving the house to me. We hadn't even formalized the transfer of ownership yet. There was no rush. Sherry thought she was, and I never thought to bring it up. All the paperwork was filled out just in case. I kind of immersed myself in my business. I was subcontracted to builders, mostly doing site preparation, and I was tired of driving 45 miles to get the equipment I needed. I had some money, my parents lent me some more, and I went into business. For the first 3 years, I put almost all of my profits into the business, buying new equipment. In the 4th year, I paid off my parents. By the time I met and married Sherry, I was proud of what I had accomplished in such a short time and didn't want to lose it. We met at a Christmas party thrown by one of the contractors I had a lot of business with. I usually avoided such events. People trying to impress themselves and each other didn't appeal to me. But that night I was bored, so I went. Of course, all the women were dressed appropriately. There were some very pretty ones there, and I'm a guy, so I was dancing, flirting, having a good time. Sherry was there with someone else, but I managed to dance with her. There was a spark between us. We both felt it, but she was with someone else, so I didn't pursue her. As I was leaving, the hostess put something in my hand. Call her. She kissed my cheek, I shook her hand, and left. I looked at the paper as I got into my truck. It was Sherry's newspaper. I put it in the basket, intending to call her, but Christmas was a busy time for my party business, so I left it at that. The week before Christmas, she came into the store, talked to Myra, and pointed it out to me. Myra giggled and wrote her a check. She said, I'd like to pick up my rental. Sure, what's the matter? She handed me the paperwork. Male, nice looking, as a chaperone for the Christmas party. Deadline, 5 hours? Duties, pleasant conversationalist, good dancer, kissing skills identified. Inability to dial a telephone number considered if willing to be trained. Delivery to the address provided. What can I say? She was about 5'8", with a pretty face and breasts that seemed to defy gravity. Miss, I will personally take care of your rental. In addition, we offer a money-back guarantee if the services prove unacceptable. Fair enough? She held out her hand. Deal, but note, I expect you to be satisfied or I want my money back. She finally burst out laughing and we went off to drink coffee and discuss further terms. Myra insisted that I buy a new suit and, not trusting me, made me take her to the mall with me. Her husband agreed, saying it was impossible to refuse such entertainment. I said, I just want to watch her make another man's man miserable. 4 hours in spite of everything, I would have taken the first one, but it just didn't fit. 8 suits later, she announced that it was the one. I breathed a sigh of relief, but her husband only laughed. You don't think you're done yet, do you? No, no, hell no, we're not done yet. The perfect shirt and tie, even the socks had to be checked. It took another 40 minutes to pick out shoes. You're not going to pick out my underwear, are you? Myra didn't blink an eye. Dark blue boxers, silk. You want to feel as good as you look, and I've already taken care of that, please. Remind me to fire you sometime. Only if my severance package includes modeling and costumes, and I expect to see those underpants too. You're hired again. If I beg you on my knees in the food court, will you let us go home? Maybe if you give me your word, you'll get a haircut tomorrow. Her husband only laughed as we got in the car. I decided that, heck, I was already dressed to the hilt, so I might as well drive a fancy car. So I rented a Cadillac Escalade for the weekend. When I arrived to pick it up, I was feeling absolutely stunning. But when I saw it, I realized I had overdone it. I would love to be the artist who painted this dress on her. Shimmering green, with a slit at the side high enough that the top seams were visible, with a neckline reaching almost to her navel. I had no idea how she was restraining those puppies, as I found out later with double-sided tape. And despite the boldness of the outfit, she looked elegant. As I was helping her into the car, I managed to catch a glimpse of her garters. I'm sure we talked along the way, but I still can't remember a word. We danced, we socialized. I was introduced to people I had instantly forgotten. She was the hit of the party and was constantly being asked to dance. She always looked wary, but it was up to her. She was dancing a slow number with a guy who was getting a little on the nose, and I was halfway through the song. She grabbed my hand and left Mr. Octopus standing still. No more slow dancing with anyone but you. She hissed in my ear as we walked back to the table. It worked on me. On the way home, she snuggled as close to me as she could and nibbled on my ear. Every time we stopped at a stoplight, I kissed her until the cars honked. Before we left her house, we washed the windows. After about 20 minutes, she asked me to walk her to the door and offered me coffee. I sat on the couch while she washed the pot and then went out to change into a dress. I was about to doze off when I heard someone clear their throat. I literally fell off the couch. When she said, "Get out of the dress," she meant get out of it and not put anything else on. I thought I was going to go blind. I couldn't speak. She got nervous when I didn't say anything. Here's the thing. I like you a lot. In a normal situation, I would have sent you home tonight. We'd go out a dozen more times, and on each date, I'd let you get farther and farther away. And then we'd have a big celebration. Candles, quiet music, maybe some whipped cream and melted chocolate. 7. But I really like you, so let's save 4 months and put my mattress to the test. 12 hours later, I did break away from him to bring us breakfast. The Escalade didn't move for the rest of the 2 days. 2 months later, we moved in together, and another 7 months later, we were married. We agreed to spend a few years together before starting a family. She was 25 and I was 29. 3 years passed and I kept hinting at starting a family. For some reason, about a year ago, she started to change, became more demanding, more materialistic. She decided that we needed a new house to start a family. Our house had 4 bedrooms, and I just didn't see the need for more. She then emptied the credit card she had managed to get despite her credit history and didn't speak to me for 2 days when I split it in 2 by paying it off. She had a job and was making pretty decent money, but stayed broke. I paid all the bills, just electric, phone, cable, and other normal household expenses except groceries. She agreed from the beginning that this would be her responsibility, and I let her do it. If you opened her closet, you'd see clothes with tags she'd probably never wear. and 4 or 5 pairs of shoes that never saw the ground. The silence about the car episode lasted about 5 days. On the sixth day, she came home and caught me pulling her clothes out of the closet. She watched, but remained silent. I'm not going to live like this. If I'm going to live alone, I'm going to live alone. I called your mother. She wasn't thrilled, but agreed to let you stay with her for 2 weeks. We should be able to find you an apartment or a house by then. I'll put down a deposit, pay the first 2 months' rent, hook up the electricity, and pay the same amount. This will give you time to learn to live on your own, to learn how to budget better, because now you'll have to pay your own way. She surprised me and passed out. I took off her clothes and laid her on the floor, taking a cold rag and wiping her forehead. She woke up in surprise. Will, I had a strange dream. You were kicking me out, but I don't remember why. She looked at her part of the closet through the open door, noticed the clothes on the bed next to her, the suitcases on the floor, and cried. She started sobbing, begging me not to make her leave, telling me she would be better. Please, 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 please. I let her go for a while, after which I told her to wash off her makeup and meet me in the kitchen. She lowered herself onto a kitchen chair without meeting his gaze. I'm serious, Sherry. I'm not going to live like this anymore. These tantrums, the out-of-control spending, the refusal to talk about starting a family. It's like I don't know you anymore. If you want to leave, just say so. If not, things have to change. She finally admitted that the thought of motherhood scares the hell out of her. She constantly thinks back to her childhood. She was the second of 3 children, only a year apart in age. As the middle child, she was lost in the hustle and bustle, and when her parents split up when she was 12, it affected her deeply. I can still see my mom crying. She had 3 teenagers, she was alone, and the stress was getting to her. She started drinking and barely paid attention to us. My dad didn't show up after the first of the year. He moved halfway across the country. I don't want to subject a child to that. I took her hand. Honey, I'm sorry you had a childhood like that, but I'm not talking about a full house, just one. If we decide we need another one, we'll wait at least 2 years. And it's a big deal, but I'll never leave you, I promise. For about 3 weeks, we tried to avoid each other, but gradually we turned into a normal young couple. She stopped spending so much and even opened a savings account. After 3 months, she showed me the balance and I was amazed. I told her I was proud of her. She laughed. Don't be too proud. It'll be empty after a while. I thought she was going to say she was going to buy a new car, but she said no. She had another use for the money. She was going to buy furniture for the nursery and I was going to have to paint it. And I liked the light blue color. It took a second for that to sink in. What? What did you just say? She smiled that smile that women have when they realize they've managed to turn your world upside down. I said we're having a son in 7 months. The nursery needs to be finished, so you're going to have to cut back a little on the store, especially near the end. I never cried in her presence. She told me this in my office, having just come from the doctor. She had stopped taking her pills, wanting to surprise me. And the plan worked. When she started crying, it startled her. Was I wrong? I thought this is what you wanted. If you had... That was all she had time to say before I covered her with kisses. Soon her tears mingled with mine. Myra realized something was wrong when we came out later. Distinguished by her delicacy and restraint, she blabbed, "What the hell is going on with you two? You look like someone slapped you and you both enjoyed it." Myra, can you keep a secret? She nodded affirmatively. This woman was better than the internet when it came to disseminating information quickly. Myra, we're having a baby. 7 more months and it's going to be a boy. Promise me you won't tell anyone. We want to surprise my mom. Promise? No, she mumbled, trying to pull her phone out of her pocket as she walked away. I watched her follow, smirking, and then turned back to Sherry. I hope you already told your mom. She grinned back. I figured it all out before I got here. Everyone in town finds out before closing time. I figured if we told her, it would take the burden off me. As was her habit, as we walked to lunch, people stopped us on the street to give Cher a hug and shake my hand. Because of the constant congratulations, we hardly had time to eat. When we got back, there was a huge poster hanging over the counter, white with blue bows. Congratulations to Will and Sherry. It's a baby. I looked at Myra and she smirked. Like I could keep such a big secret. You assholes knew I'd explode if I couldn't tell anyone. I laughed and went back to the office. The pregnancy turned out to be a failure. 7 months later, Sherry was put on bed rest. I looked at her pale, gaunt face and realized that we would never have another child. It would be too dangerous for her. Sherry was not a model patient. Her mother had moved in with her, the only one who could be there for her. Mostly because when it got really bad, she would ask her to shut up and leave her alone for a couple hours. The labor lasted 17 hours before they finally did a C-section. Sherry was on the verge of exhaustion. When she was finally able to speak, she said, "Never again." I agreed with her. She was already in the hospital, so she had her tubes tied before she left. William Bryan Sanford weighed almost 9 pounds, which accounted for much of her pain. He had a full head of thick black hair just like me. I was disappointed when the nurse told me they would probably come out before his real hair color showed. She was wrong. He never lost his hair and it stayed black. If you've never experienced it, all the words in the universe can't describe the feeling you get when you become a parent. It is breathtakingly beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It is no longer about you, and it will never be about you again, even when they are grown. They become your world, and everything you do is sublimated into their well-being. Spontaneous trips and romantic weekends away are a thing of the past. Now you have to plan everything, stock up on the essentials, even if it's just a trip to the grocery store. To my disappointment, Sherry didn't take motherhood as well as I thought she would. She clearly loved it, but as soon as I got home, she would hand it over to me and lay in the chair for an hour. She called it baby recovery time. I didn't mind walking around with him in my arms, talking about how the day went and what I wanted out of our life together. I talked about Little League, Boy Scouts, camping, girls, anything that would interest a boy. He scrutinized my face, humming and smiling without understanding a word. Sherry was incredibly annoyed that he never cried with me. I would come home and he would cry, especially if he wasn't feeling well. I would pick him up and start walking him, and 90% of the time he would calm down immediately. After giving birth, I took 2 weeks off to be with Sherry and Billy. When I returned, there was a big sign in front of the building. Sanford and Son Equipment Rentals. No junk. Myra and Charlie were standing there grinning. Tears came to my eyes. I had a slideshow of Billy, Sherry, and us together on my screensaver. My friendship with the Hatfields started gradually. Angie came in one day and wanted to rent a tractor. I asked what she wanted the tractor for. "I want to plant a garden. I've already ordered seeds from Baker's Creek. I need a tractor and equipment to get the beds ready." I admired her determination but would not rent her a tractor. This really surprised her. "Why?" "Because you don't know how to operate it. Tractors can be very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. If I rent it to you and you kill yourself, I'll feel really bad. Plus, I'll lose you as a client and a friend. I don't want that on my conscience. Besides, you don't need to rent it. I've seen that little Yanmar and all the equipment in your shed. You already have everything you need." Mr. Henderson had a big auction when he retired and got rid of all his farm equipment. He bought the Yanmar later because he liked having a tractor around and he liked to garden. It probably didn't even have 500 hours on it. "It won't turn on." I saw the look of determination on her face. I knew that if I didn't help her, she'd find someone else. "The battery must be dead. Look, tomorrow's Saturday. Why don't I come in and look at it?" "Oh, I can't tear you away from your family." "No, they'll be with me." I took Sherry and Billy to my house that Saturday, and Angie cooed over the baby for an hour, holding her in her arms the whole time. Sherry was annoyed that Billy was crying, but she stopped when Angie took her in her arms. I brought the charger with me and plugged it into the tractor. While it was charging, Bennett and I looked around the neighborhood for a possible garden plot. "Are you sure you want her to ride the tractor?" His answer was honest enough. "No, but you have no idea how determined she can be. I'm asking you to keep an eye on her and give her advice." We talked about it while Angie and Sherry disappeared into the kitchen, where we came out with a plate of sandwiches and a big bowl of potato salad. We ate while talking about her garden projects. They cleared the table, refreshed their drinks, and listened to me. "Ben and I have already talked about it. He's going to put a crossbar and seatbelt on the tractor before you get serious about it. Come on out to the barn and we'll give you your first lesson." I brought the tractor out of the barn and sat her on it. I showed her the brakes, throttle, hydraulics, and gears. "I'll tell you this, and I want you to remember and be careful. The gears in a tractor work differently than they do in an automobile. No matter what gear you are in, the tractor will move when you release the clutch. It will not stall like a car. Therefore, if you forget and start driving in a high gear, you will likely lift the front end off the ground. If you're sitting on a slope or at a bad angle, you could flip the tractor over. This is why I recommend using a collapsible harness. If you're wearing a seatbelt and stay within the harness, you may have to change your pants later, but you shouldn't get hurt. I asked her to put the car in low gear and low range, and she drove across the field. She was moving so slowly that I could walk beside her giving directions. I asked her to stop and practice moving the hydraulic three-point hitch up and down. I set up the rotary plow. Try never to start the tractor without the equipment. If you depress the clutch or hit a steep slope, the equipment will pick you up and keep you from rolling over. It can throw you off balance, but it's worth it considering the alternative. I asked her to put the plow down and make a few passes over the chosen spot. She grinned from ear to ear while Ben took pictures. She got upset when I started the tractor in the barn and pulled out the key. It wouldn't start anyway. The battery's dead. I have a friend coming over on Tuesday to install the crossmember and seat belts. I'll bring you the battery and he can install it. He will give you a key and a spare, which I will do. But first, don't drive by yourself. Wait until Ben gets home. We'll be back next Saturday and I'll show you how to use and change the equipment. After hugging and shaking hands, we hit the road. On the way home, Sherry perked up. She has a beautiful home. It looks nothing like the one Mr. Henderson had. There are paintings on the walls that must be worth thousands. She blabbed that she had a trust fund when we were talking about art. Did you know they also have a house up north? It belonged to her grandmother. Now it belongs to her. Good for them. They're a good couple. They deserve it. All the way home, she was silent. Later, I watched as she studied the prints she saw and assessed their value. She was right, some of them were worth thousands. Sherry went back to her work. She loved her job, and we didn't really need her income yet. Besides, I knew the thought of having to stay home all day with no one to talk to would drive her crazy. We had a good time teaching Angie how to drive the tractor. Ben learned too, but not as enthusiastically as she did. She planted her garden and bought a small cultivator to use when the tractor wasn't needed. She cried when she harvested the first string beans she grew. She continued to expand the garden. I warned her that it would be too much for her, but she laughed. Ben leaves early and comes home late. I can only do so many chores around the house, and I don't really enjoy sitting around watching TV. Besides, I have a lot to talk about on my blog. She started a blog, Gone Country, detailing her experience of learning to live in the countryside. It was very popular, humorous, entertaining, sometimes serious. There were lots of pictures and videos. Some of them featured me because I was helping her. She called me her spiritual advisor in all things rural. It was embarrassing, especially when Myra started reading them. Angie decided from the beginning that she wanted to be as organic as possible. I introduced her to a friend who owned a stable and kept horses, and he agreed to give her some manure for the garden. The snag was that she would have to clean the stalls to do it. I thought that would be the end of it, but soon she had gloves, boots, and thick clothes. On her blog, she called it her uniform for shit. The blog even had a picture of her wearing it all, with a bandana covering her hair. She cleaned 3 stalls twice a week. Her compost pile was turning into a mountain. For a while, Sherry rode with me every time I came over, but then she started going less and less often. I heard everything I could about manure, crop rotation, and organic pesticides. I took Billy with me almost every time, putting his carrier in the shade where I could keep an eye on him. In those days, Angie spent about as much time with him as she did gardening. As we became closer friends, I asked her if she ever wanted to have children. Yes, when that didn't happen, we got tested. Ben is infertile. It happened when he was very young. We talked about adoption, but he wasn't comfortable with that. I walked away from the subject. He was my husband and soulmate, and I couldn't bear the thought of not being with him. Sometimes, when I hold Billy in my arms, I think about what I'm missing. Then he tidies up his diaper, and I can't wait to give it to his parents. Wow, here, take it. She held it out to me like she was holding a pail of toxic waste. Ben came out later and sat with us in the shade. Will, I want you to do something for me if you can. My new partners and I are planning a meeting. I want to set it up here, an old southern barbecue. I want you and Sherry to cook it for me. And Will, you get the money, or we won't talk about this anymore. This isn't a reunion, it's a business meeting. I'd have to pay someone anyway. and I know firsthand how good your restaurant is. I want them to remember it for a long time. I hadn't cooked professionally in years, and I missed it. I agreed. He and Angie breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks, Will. I'll need party supplies, tents, chairs, tables, and such. Angie will coordinate. Most of the clients will be here. I really want to make a good impression. 3 weeks wasn't a long time to prepare something like this. Angie started meeting with us every day at our house to coordinate everything. My first question was how many people to prepare for. We have 80 confirmed, but count on 100. We don't want to run out of food. How many children? No, just adults. She saw me frown. What? Nothing, she snorted. Spit it out, Will. If you have an argument, spit it out. Okay. I think you're sending the wrong message. This is the South. Family is very much loved here. You should invite wives and kids, make a more personal connection. Some won't like it, but most will be impressed. And while you should send out invitations, make a phone call. Find out how many kids will be at the party, their ages, and make sure you have age-appropriate games and activities. Saying, "Be sure to come," will make a much bigger impression than a note asking for your presence. She sat with her mouth open and turned to Ben. Have you sent out the invitations yet? No? Good. We need to change them. And I need the names of all the wives and their phone numbers. I'll explain later. Bye, sweetie. She looked at me incredulously. Have you ever thought about running for office? You could win thanks to the kebab vote. No, I said, laughing. It's just that I've been to a lot of parties and there you learn as you go. Angie worked the phones. We went from 100 people to almost 300. We hired 3 neighborhood girls to serve. Sherry, Myra, and Charlie worked with me. It was a perfect day. Hot but not unbearable, a light breeze. I set up a tent in the castle as a dining room and built fans into the top poles to keep it cooler. 400 pounds of pork cooked to perfection and shredded. 20 chickens and 2 beef briskets cooked on a separate stove for the Jewish partners. Labels for side dishes so they know what is not kosher. Potato salad, coleslaw, baked beans, zucchini casserole, grilled vegetables, mostly from Angie's vegetable garden. For dessert, cakes and brownies in a variety of flavors, all homemade. As a bonus, we had chilled watermelon for the kids. I was exhausted, but it was worth it. 300 people were invited, 420 came. The difference was the number of kids. I asked Charlie to watch the 3 teenagers while they parked their cars. They chatted and socialized for an hour before dinner. Mostly self-service was used to keep the atmosphere informal. Because of the family theme, no alcohol was allowed in the dining tent. I set up a small marquee on the side with 2 kegs and an open self-service bar, but it was not allowed to be opened until an hour after the meal was over. The senior partners made sure everyone understood that excessive alcohol consumption was not welcome. The kids ran in packs, screaming and laughing as they played on the equipment I had bought or the games they were playing. Angie and Ben were the best hosts, going from group to group to make sure everyone was having an enjoyable time. Following the age-old custom, the men gathered together to talk business, and the women gathered together to talk about their men. Under each tree, the usual soft furniture was arranged in the shade. I stopped to admire Sherry, elegant in her conservative sundress, with her hair gathered in a bun. She was surrounded by a group of people praising our dish. We both gave and received a bunch of business cards. Just before the event ended, we gathered everyone in a secluded restaurant tent to give a short speech. I had set up a small hands-free system with microphones. The senior partner thanked everyone for coming and wished them success in their future endeavors. He praised Angie and Ben for organizing the event and thanked Sherry and I for hosting it. He then surprised everyone with his words. He was known for speaking at length. That's all I want to say. It was so much fun, I'm not going to spoil anything. We have some food left and we have containers. Don't waste them, take some home. We also have ice cream ready. Let's all take a portion each. He walked out of the auditorium to the biggest applause he said he had ever received for his speech. We had ice cream machines set up, ready to go, with different flavors of ice cream. Chocolate, banana, pineapple, blueberry, and of course, vanilla. The kids, as well as some of the adults, got headaches from the ice cream because they ate it too fast. Angie's garden was very popular. I saw her several times with groups of women and 1 or 2 men giving tours and answering questions. She would often pick a ripe tomato or a handful of beans and hand them out. Some of the watermelons we kept in the refrigerator for dessert were from her bed. They quickly became the most sought after because their seeds were a little larger than usual, which gave them more opportunities in the seed spitting contest the kids would have. Sherry almost had a stroke when Angie handed her the check. The celebration had gotten so big that they hadn't let Ben pay the bill, turning it into a real corporate event. There was another check, a 25% bonus, with a note from the senior partner thanking us again. I took the bonus check and gave part of it to Charlie, Myra, and the kids we were using. I gave the rest to Sherry. She deserved it. Ben worked for a firm that did mostly business law, and I started getting calls before the next week offering to host parties. The demand was so great and the profits so great that we incorporated as a separate business. Sherry quit her job and became the manager. She was good and got better and better. Of course, all the rent came from us. I had to promote Myra to rental manager, and she hired her husband. He was laid off and we needed help, so it worked out great, except for one thing. She's the boss at home and also the boss at work. I won't be able to make another decision for the rest of my life. This is your fault, Will. Get over it, Donnie. Just think, how many men literally entertain their boss at the end of the day? That cheered him up. Sherry started dressing better, and sometimes she had to schedule evening appointments with clients. We finally made enough money to buy her a Cadillac. I thought I had it all worked out. Winter came and went. In the party business, Saturday was a work day. You either worked the event itself, planned the event, or met with clients. By arrangement, Sherry handled the meetings and planning, and I coordinated the equipment, staff, and food preparation. We actually made more money from the parties than we did from the rental business. We never seemed to have time for each other. This reached a breaking point when she started having meetings on Saturdays, sometimes not getting home until after 11 o'clock. I asked her not to do this, but she said she had to meet at the client's request and that it was best for them. After 3 weeks in a row, I lost my temper. I told her that the next late meeting would be up to her. I wouldn't cook, I wouldn't coordinate, I wouldn't be there. I thought this was a partnership, she exclaimed. Right now, I'm more interested in a husband and wife partnership. You choose what's more important to you, the business or us. She muttered something else, but I ignored her and went after Billy. He had been awakened by her screams. I carried out my threat. The next month, she had an appointment that kept her out of the house until 11:30. On Sunday afternoon, she wanted to schedule it for me. No. No what, dear? I'm not going to help plan or coordinate it, and I'm certainly not going to cook for it. I told you the next contract that costs me a Saturday night with my wife will be the first one she'll have to do on her own. I think I'll take Billy for a ride. I left her with her mouth open. This was a disaster. They didn't like the food, the service, or the atmosphere. There was no premium, and the customers were telling her how disappointed they were that she hadn't lived up to her reputation. Up until that point, she treated me like crap. On Sunday, she came out of her bedroom with a little white handkerchief and waved it. Truce? I fed Billy breakfast. No. Her eyes widened. I won't accept a truce. I want to surrender. Meet my terms and we'll move on. Refuse or ignore them, and that's the end of it. No negotiation. No negotiation. Take it or leave it. I lifted Billy into my arms. I'm going to go visit Ben and Angie. He needs my advice on a matter. We'll be back in an hour or so. Billy loved Angie and she adored him. She was often our babysitter when we worked at the party. He was just learning to talk, and one of his first words was Angie. She cried when he said it. He was learning to walk, and as soon as I put him on the ground, he would run to her as fast as his little uncertain gait would allow. He learned to say Ben, and tried to follow me at every opportunity. Ben wanted to ask me about the little race car that was in one of the barns. Mr. Henderson didn't drive that car, but he loved racing and sponsored it. I knew the engine had blown up, but the frame and transmission worked. Do you think it can be repaired? No, it needs a new engine and a few little things. It can't be repaired, but it can be rebuilt. Why would you want to do that? He looked puzzled. I'm a big NASCAR fan. I've always wanted to drive a race car. This would be perfect. Well, it couldn't be helped. How does Angie feel about it? She doesn't really want to, but she's willing to watch one race. I need you to tell her it's safe. It is, isn't it? Relatively. I don't know anyone who's died in a car like this, but you could get injured. Start as a novice racer and learn as you go. We fixed the car. Ben took some lessons from the older racers, and soon he was racing every Friday night at the local dirt track. Sherry and I kissed and made up, and one night we went to watch them. It was noisy, dirty, and I could see Ben was enjoying it. Charlie and a few neighborhood kids were his pit crew. The rules were pretty relaxed, so we were in the pits with them. Ben was in the lead when he started to lose speed and position and drove into the pits. There was nothing wrong with the car. He had been fighting the flu all week and the heat had weakened him. We got him out of the car and started pouring fluids into the car. They were both disappointed. He was leading his class in points, and it looked like he could be the points champion. If he didn't finish the race, it would make his chances much worse. Charlie spoke up. You know, he's allowed to substitute for a competitor in case of illness. He looked directly at me. That won't work, Charlie. The cage is designed for his size, and I won't fit in there. Someone his size or smaller will fit in here. We both turned and looked at Angie. Oh no, I don't know anything about racing. You don't need to race. All you need to know is how to shift gears. Just stay behind the group and stay out of the way. He'll get credit for finishing the race and he'll save a bunch of points. Ben listened to the conversation. Do it, honey. I really want that trophy. The cage will protect you, just be careful. She looked at him for a few seconds. Give me the helmet. And if I crash, not a word. We buckled her in. Stay down below. Keep a steady speed and they'll catch you and leave you alone. Are you sure about that? She looked me in the eye. No. Then she hit the gas and gravel flew in all directions. The first 15 laps went pretty smoothly. The other racers knew the score and left her alone. All but one. He was behind Ben in the points race, and if he knocked the car out of the race before the finish line, it would improve his position considerably. On the next lap, he collided with her, which scared the hell out of Angie. We could hear her screaming into her headset. What the hell is he doing? I had a different headset. He's trying to knock you out of the race. Next time he jumps out at you, hit the brake and then the gas. He'll hit you, but he won't have enough speed to do serious damage, and if he speeds up, he might get tangled up in traffic and lose a couple positions. She executed perfectly. He flew toward her. She managed to brake before he picked up speed, and as soon as he touched her bumper, she flew out of the car. He got tangled up in a bunch of cars and she actually won the lap. He caught up with her again, but this time luck was on his side, and he crashed into the wall. The caution alarm went off and she drove into pit lane. She flew out of the cage looking at the crumpled fender. She tossed the helmet into the car. Can you fix it? We can take it out, but we won't have time to clean it. She was pumped. She seemed to like it. Rip the damn thing off and get me back in the race. I'll seal that asshole into the wall. Come on. Charlie tugged at her wing as I shoved her into the cage and buckled her in. Don't be stupid. That's what leads to injuries. Watch him. He'll do the same thing again when he gets the chance. Charlie yelled, "Clear!" and she got back into the race. She drove the car like it was a stolen Maserati. She was overtaking cars. She saw it coming, and I yelled into the headset, "Cut left! Now!" She swerved onto the highway, taking him by surprise. He slammed into a neighboring car, throwing it aside and causing pandemonium. Angie whizzed past him, and when the warning was lifted, she was third. By the time the checkered flag came out, she had taken the lead, but because of lost laps, she finished 7th out of 15. The guy who tried to ram her was unable to finish, so he is listed 15th on the timesheets, which further set him back from Ben. He and his team were pulling into the pit lane when Angie got out of her car and took off her helmet. How does it feel to have a girl driving, asshole? She turned around, bent over, and patted her ass. Then she started giggling and hugged Ben. The guy didn't know what to do. Finally, he got a lung full of air, but that's when I intervened. The words out of your mouth should be polite. She beat you at your own game. Use that as experience. His own team, ready for battle a few minutes ago, grinned openly. He turned on his heel and walked away. Sherry was taking pictures like crazy. After that, Angie got hooked on it. She used some of her trust money to buy a car. The local track had a women's division and she raced in it for the rest of the year. She started too late for points, but won 2 races. Ben won his trophy. They had already started planning for next year. His company and some of their customers agreed to paint both cars the same colors with their logos prominently displayed. Our company's logos were on them as well. It was a small dirt track, hardly legal and recognized, So they knew it was just a recreational activity, even though many successful racers started their careers on such tracks. But for Angie and Ben, it was a shared hobby that brought them even closer together. What did Sherry and I have in common? Nothing except Billy. Our business was growing and now we had two teams. She dressed prettier, acted more arrogant, and had little time for Billy and me. She joined a professional women's organization and became active, getting together for meetings and drinks every 2 weeks. I didn't mind, and when she received the award, I was very proud. I attended the banquet, and when I was introduced as her husband, I saw the concerned looks of several of her girlfriends. I wasn't as stupid as people thought and asked her about it. Some of those women looked awfully surprised when I was introduced as your husband. Do you have a city husband you don't tell me about? I joked, but her face flushed horribly. She gasped, No, honey, they were just surprised to see that I didn't make you up. You really should come to mixers with me more often so I can show you off. A perfectly reasonable explanation, but it wasn't quite right. We were swamped with work, so I put the matter to rest. She must have woken up and stayed home. It was early fall and things were winding down. We went back to the same crew. They were well trained, and sometimes we would leave them to sort themselves out, and one or the other of us would politely show up to assure the customer. We had a good base of customers, and some of them became good friends of ours. His boss called me and wanted to throw Ben a joint birthday and victory celebration. He was a good guy and very good at what he did, and they wanted to show their appreciation and let him brag about his racing career. They wanted me to cook. How many people? About 40 people, all adults, just his friends. We don't want you to attend the celebration professionally, but you're probably the best friend he has outside of work. He says that if it weren't for you, he and Angie might never have stayed. We just didn't want to offend you by inviting someone else. I'd love to cook, but let's not get carried away. How about this? I'll cook the meat, pork, and chicken, and make coleslaw. Have your wives make the desserts and side dishes. I'm sure he'll appreciate it more. I told Sherry about it and gave her the date. I have an event the same day. We've already signed a contract. I can't. I got a little angry. They're our friends. If they hadn't asked us to throw a party the first time, we wouldn't even have a business. It would be an insult if you didn't show up. Politely show up to the party, make sure everything is running smoothly, turn things over to the team and come back. Think of Angie and Ben. I moved the slabs and set them up. I pulled the truck up to the house to make another parking lot. Since our lots were connected, Ben and I built a little road through the woods from my patio to his porch. We rode back and forth on ATVs. It was much faster that way. If I pulled into the driveway and saw a pink helmet on the railing, I knew Angie had arrived. The party was in full swing. Everyone was socializing and having a great time. Sherry had just called and said she was stuck at work but would be there within the hour. We were running low on ice that one of the partners was supposed to bring in. I had some ice in my freezer left over from a party the week before, so I volunteered to come on my four-wheeler and bring it over. I had to take Ben's car because mine was locked. He forgot to put gas in it, and halfway to the house I ran out of gas and had to walk. I was about to come out of the woods when I saw them. The blinds on the patio door were pulled back and you could walk right into the living room. There was a couple sitting on the couch having sex. I figured one of the neighborhood kids had gotten into the house. There had been an increase in break-ins lately. They weren't taking much, but they were having small parties, vandalizing the place, drinking whatever they could get their hands on and messing up the beds. I was already reaching out to call 911 when the lovers stirred. A woman approached me. It was Sherry. I recognized the man. It was one of the young employees from Ben's office. They were wondering why he had missed the party. My first impulse was to barge in and beat the crap out of both of them, but having a lawyer best friend had taught me something. Before moving here, Ben had worked as a divorce attorney for a while. I hate that business, he once told me. You get cynical watching people crumble their worlds. If they would just approach it logically, it would save them a lot of grief. Unfortunately, it's hard to act logically, especially if they've witnessed infidelity. And if someone is assaulted, things get even worse. Usually it's a guy, and it significantly weakens their bargaining position. Sometimes they lose the kids because her lawyer describes his violent tendencies in murderous terms. No one wins in a divorce, especially when children are involved. Lawyers make money, but that's about it. Standing in the woods and watching your wife betray you is hard enough to be reasonable. Shaking with rage, I headed for the door when I remembered Ben's words. I also remembered his words about favorable positions and hid behind the trees. Walking a little ways down the path, I called out to Ben. He answered in a cheerful, slightly murmuring voice. Hey, buddy. What took you so long? Maybe I should send Angie to get you? No, send Angie. I need to ask her something. Angie came to her senses and asked if she needed to come get me. She hadn't had much to drink, so her head was clear. Angie, I really need your help. I just saw Sherry at the house. She wasn't alone and she wasn't wearing any clothes. I want to meet her face to face, but I don't think that's a good idea right now. I need the most sober of them all to come as a witness. And I need a recommendation from a divorce lawyer. Help me out. You could hear the pain in her voice. Poor guy. Are you sure? Never mind. If you weren't sure, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Stay away until I get there. 20 minutes later, Angie, Ben, and his partner's 2 wives came down the path. Are you sure, Will? I showed them the pictures I had on my phone. One of the women spoke up. I'm a divorce lawyer, Will. A damn good one. I have a separate practice. My husband decided it was a good idea. I offer advice on how to proceed and my services if you need them. I never knew she was a lawyer herself. I only knew her as the wife of one of Ben's partners. Angie put her arm around me and stroked my shoulders, trying to reassure me, and told me to think of Billy. Thanks, Julie. I'll take them both if you agree. What do I need to do? The hardest thing you can do in this situation is to stay calm. Don't engage in conversation with them when we run into them. Let me do the talking myself. Control yourself, Will. It will give you an advantage. She smiled a wolfish smile in the darkness. But if he's stupid enough to try to attack you in front of a bunch of lawyers, you have every right to defend yourself. Ben picked up the phone. They're almost here. Let's go. They had everything ready to go. The most senior of the partners was already pulling up to my driveway, presumably to get the promised ice. The others were waiting outside on the deck, climbing the side steps and avoiding the light from the patio door. We heard a knock. Sherry, are you in here? Will send us to get ice and we don't have any. He continued to rant when she didn't answer the door. Well, he gave us a key. Come on, boys. I don't like being in someone else's house when he's not there. Sherry and her lover were gathering clothes when they heard the sound of the door opening. She swung the door open, and he ran out onto the deck to hide in the dark. When I turned on the light, the look on his face was priceless. We had a switch outside when we wanted to enjoy the dark and didn't want to go back inside. Usually at that time, we only undressed. 4 cell phones clicked as he stood holding his pants, shorts, and shoes. Sherry had time to get dressed, led her partners into the kitchen, and saw us standing on the porch. She screamed, ran out of the house, and disappeared. He didn't know what to say, but the older partner raised his hand. Not a word. Be in my office at 9 o'clock on Monday. Now go. No. He put all the power the senior executive was capable of into his voice and left. Angie and Ben sat down next to me, each holding my hand so I wouldn't fall into a stupor. Julie gave me her card, telling me to be in her office at 2 o'clock on Monday afternoon. She then gave me a hug. We all went back to the party. I went so I wouldn't have to stay home. Naturally, everyone left early and I spent the night in their guest room. I couldn't sleep for a long time and Angie made me get up by sicking Billy on me. It's impossible to sleep when you have a 2-year-old in your care. I realized with a shock that I hadn't thought about how to protect him, and Angie got up early to pick him up, telling my mother-in-law that I was having too good a time and she volunteered to pick him up for me instead. She had picked him up before when we first started our party business. He sat on Angie's lap and she let him feed her breakfast, smearing syrup all over her face and giggling like crazy. It made us smile. When she took him to the bathroom so they could both clean up, Ben said we'd talk when we put him to bed. In the afternoon, we had our first military conference. Angie got to the heart of the matter. Divorce? Yes, I look back now and realize how it happened. We stopped sharing dreams. She always wanted to live in the big city. I, on the other hand, have always been a country boy. My roots are deep here. What about Billy? I want custody, no doubt about it. I think a baby would interfere with the lifestyle she wants. Ben had a few comments. I agree that Billy doesn't fit the lifestyle, but it gives her power over you. She can have a custody battle with you to get more financial compensation, and the rest of it doesn't matter anymore. Careful, Julie. She'll get at your throat and run over anyone who stops her. We have to keep the negotiations from turning into a war. I didn't see her for 6 days. I came home and there she was. It took everything I had not to throw her out the door. She saw the look in my eyes and backed away. Please don't say anything now. I may deserve it, but I'm only here to get my stuff and see Billy. Please, Will, just for a little while. And then I'll leave quietly. You can even take my car keys. I gave in to her entreaties, staying out of it and letting her play with Billy. She had been paying so little attention to him lately that he seemed bored. She asked for her keys back so she could open the trunk and then asked if I'd help her get her clothes. I was about to go in again when I heard her car start. I walked through the door and was beside her before she could put it in gear. I snatched the keys and tossed them into the driveway. She cried out as I pulled Billy out of the car seat. He's mine, and you can't keep him. Billy screamed, not realizing what was happening. She was cursing all she could when she noticed Angie filming everything on her iPhone. She came over on her four-wheeled motorcycle that she had designed herself to see Billy and make sure I was okay. She'd stop by for 30 to 40 minutes and leave for home, just in time for Ben to arrive. You bitch, could have known you'd be here. Give him some before hubby gets home? How many times has poor Ben gotten sloppy seconds? Is he hiding in the closet and peeking? Angie turned white with anger. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't yelled, Sherry, leave, and I mean right now. From now on, if you want to visit Billy, get permission from the court. Now get out of my life before I call the police. There was so much more I wanted to say, but Billy came first for me. Sherry walked away, continuing to scream. Angie wrote down every word. The next day, Julie had the tape and filed a restraining order until Sherry underwent a psychiatric evaluation. She recorded her screaming. I wondered where she was living. Apparently, the guy she was with became her new lover and they were together. Another strike against her. He was fired because of the affair. They used flowery language, but the point was clear. Fired, and no references. He took a job at another firm with a lower salary. I sent out a letter to all our clients informing them that I was no longer in business but would honor all remaining contracts. After that, Sherry was in charge. I was about to say to hell with it, but Julie talked me out of it. You have a good reputation, and you might want to get back into the business later. Besides, this will give Sherry a real income that might come in handy later on. She hired a lawyer and the dance began. She wanted the house. Too bad, it was still listed as my parents'. She needed party equipment. Since it was rented from my company, which was stipulated in the prenup, she couldn't afford it. Julie had frozen most of our accounts. By forced agreement, she managed one team, I managed the other. Money could only be withdrawn for paychecks and purchases. The rest had to remain frozen until the divorce. All profits made after I fulfilled my obligations went into a new account completely controlled by Sherry. That was about as fair as I could make it. Sherry struggled until Julie and her attorney convinced her to take the deal if she expected to have any money left at all. She wanted to have one last meeting to talk things over, but I refused. As it turned out, her lawyer was the fifth lover she'd dated in the last 18 months. All of them were slick city types, most of whom had no money. I couldn't think of anything to say to her that didn't end with the phrase, "Goddamn bitch." I tried to stay polite for Billy's sake. He was turning 3 and didn't miss her that much. She ended up getting the party and catering business, giving me a fourth of the profits. I didn't have much time left, so Julie beckoned me with the carrot. As a result, she was left with the business and some working capital. That was all the money she got from me. I got full custody of Billy. She had broad visitation rights. I never turned her down. However, she had to stick to the rules. No men. While she had Billy, and if she ever exposed him to anything that was considered morally or physically dangerous, she lost her rights. After a year, the visits became less and less frequent. Billy didn't seem to mind. Angie and Ben became a support and encouragement to me. They helped me deal with my grief and anger. Sherry's mom still babysat Billy, agreeing that if she helped Sherry break the custody agreement, all contact with him would cease. Angie became a surrogate mother with Ben's blessing. He still followed Ben around, and at work Ben had a picture of him, Angie and Billy on his desk. People thought of him as their stepson, and he let them up to a point. At first he asked my permission, saying it made him look like a family man and that it would help him with new clients. I surprised him terribly when I gave him a copy of my will, which listed them as Billy's executors and guardians should anything happen to me. You're a family man, Ben. You always have been. You have the most impressive woman I've ever seen, and you have us. I'd never seen a male lawyer cry. It was touching. After a while, I dated a few. They were fun to be with, they met my needs, but I never met anyone I would consider as a long-term partner. Angie gave me hell by telling me that Billy needed a mother. I just looked at her. He has one. And as soon as I find a match for her, I'll be married so fast it'll make your head spin. The one closest to me was a lawyer. It was the senior partner's daughter. She was a few years older, had just gone through a difficult divorce, had found a very good job on the other coast, and had taken 3 months off to recover. She needed an escort and her father called me. Do me a favor, Will. She's recently arrived in town, and I'd really like her to come to the banquet with me, but she needs an escort. She's considered a beauty, if that helps. There was nothing to do, so I agreed. I rented a Cadillac, and it was déjà vu. Was she beautiful? Damn beautiful. Barely 5 feet tall, blonde, fair-skinned, with a very nice body. She was like a breathing porcelain doll. I could feel my interest growing. I think she felt a little spark, and her simmering personality took over. Ooh, a real live redneck. I've never been this close to one before. Do you bite? And I looked at her with the most serious look I was capable of. Yes. Good. Ben, Angie, and her parents burst into laughter, and that set the tone for the entire evening. It was a charity event, the most prestigious of the year. Black tie, the whole thing. I thought I looked pretty dressy. The food was delicious, and Rhonda talked nonstop. She told me later that it was a nervous streak. She talked about the appetizer, the entrees, the dessert. Do you ever stop talking? She blushed, then smiled innocently. Only when I have something interesting in my mouth. Ben sipped his coffee through his nose and Angie giggled. Come on, you two. This must be serious business. After that, there was a big orchestra and dancing. Angie was teaching me how to dance so I wouldn't fall over. Sophie was a great dance partner, graceful, smooth, and lovely to look at. She danced twice with Dad and once with Ben, and all the other dances were mine. Ben and I were waiting for the girls at the bandstand when Sherry walked by. Ben, Will, it's good to see you. Are you here alone, Will? You really should go outside more often. Let me introduce you to my escort. Robert Morgan. Perhaps you know his father, Ben Wilson Morgan, the founder of the Morgan Banking Network? I stared at her as she tried to impress us. Her face was calloused and she looked like she'd gained 10 pounds. One look at her escort and you could tell he wasn't with her for intelligent conversation. At that moment, Angie and Sophie walked up. She kissed me on the cheek. Do you miss me, sweetheart? Good. I want you to be upset all night. It'll be more fun when we make the crazy passionate love you promised me. Oh, I'm sorry. Who are your friends? I looked past her and saw Angie laughing. I knew immediately that she had told Sophie who Sherry was, and they were playing a complete prank on her. Where are my manners? Sophie, this is Robert Morgan, a representative of the Morgan banking family. And this is Sherry Blankenship. I made her drop my first name and revert to her maiden name, a local businesswoman and my ex-wife. Sherry, Robert, this is Sophie Williams of the firm of Williams, Roberts, Howe, and Hatfield. Perhaps you've heard of them? Well, my dears, shall we dance the waltz? We left them both with their mouths open. As we were leaving, I whispered, Angie told you who she was, didn't she? Sophie snuggled a little closer to him. Yes, and a little bit of history. I hope she's not having an easy time today. Don't worry. From the way they're looking at us, I think she is. We finished and she pulled my head to hers, gifting me with a 2-minute tongue kiss. Did she see that? Give me a minute for the blood to return to my brain. Yes, she saw it, and thank you. You're welcome. And it was my pleasure. Sure enough, they came to the table a little later. Robert asked Sophie to dance, and Sherry asked me to dance. Just for old time's sake. Sophie smiled sweetly. I'd love to, but I promised my lover all the other dances. Me too. Sorry, Sherry. Maybe next time. They looked stunned, and Angie pressed her napkin to her mouth to suppress a laugh. They left without another word. I looked at Sophie. I'm glad you're not staying here permanently. She looked hurt. Why did you say such a nasty thing? I'm starting to like you. Because there were fights everywhere we went. I fought to keep men away from you, and you fought to keep me away from you. She smiled, slowly. What makes you think I'd fight back? She didn't resist, and we spent every spare minute we had together. Angie wouldn't even let Billy go so we could spend the weekend together. She was the best lover I'd had so far. Despite her small stature, she was surprisingly strong. She never told me her age, but I guess she was in her early 40s, and she was as strong and sturdy as a 20-year-old. She told me that the old-timers called it a round trip, and I was racking up frequent flyer miles. She adored Billy and showed me pictures of her daughter, a cute little copy of her. She looked 13 years old. My ex has her now. I gave him more time because soon we'll be separated by 3,000 kilometers. It made me sad to think about Billy being so far away. Life went on. To pass the time, I opened a barbecue restaurant. Myra was still renting the space and doing so well that I left her alone. Restaurants are time-consuming and success is terrible, but I already had a good reputation and I was successful. I bought 4 vans, outfitted them, and sent them to neighboring towns 4 days a week. They were very successful. I still didn't have anyone permanent in my life and I pretty much stopped looking. It catches up with you when you least expect it. When you start to love your life, when you are truly happy. I'm not talking about love, I'm talking about tragedy. Billy was 9 years old. He was getting off the bus at Angie's house and riding his little four-wheeler through the woods when I came home. She would ride with him, wave at me, and walk home. She would feed him his afternoon snack, check his schoolwork, and he would help her around the house. We were all fine with that. On the rare occasions when I had a date, he stayed there overnight. Angie had a room set aside for him. He called me at 3 o'clock right after he got off the bus. He was crying. Come over soon, Daddy. Aunt Angie is lying on the floor crying and I can't get her up. I flew down the road. Just as he said, she was lying on the floor and sobbing quietly. She wasn't answering or talking to me. I was about to dial 911 when Ben's boss called. Will, I need you to go to Angie and make sure she's okay. I'm with her right now and she's not okay. I can't get her to talk. It's not like Ben was in an accident. I can hear the emotion in his voice. Ben is dead, Will. He had a heart attack and they said death was almost instantaneous. We found him on the floor of his office when he missed a lunch meeting. He'd been gone for an hour by then. I almost dropped my phone. Ben was gone? He had become my best friend, but he was Angie's life. I pulled her into my arms. Her face cleared for a second and she clung to me like a drowning woman. Ben! Ben! I pulled her against the couch, cradling her to me like a child. The tears flowed, and they weren't all hers. She was a zombie. We finalized the funeral plans after his boss brought us his will. He had just updated it. He was to be cremated and his ashes scattered around the farm. This is the only place I have ever felt at home, his will said. Amazing people gathered for the visitation and service. Most of his clients had become friends. His racetrack buddies came in full force, and all the members and employees of his firm. Sherry walked over and gave Angie a hug. She was sitting with Billy on her lap during the visit, and Sherry's mother was next to her. They became very close because of Billy and were very close. She followed me around the room and worried if I was going to disappear from sight. Ben was 52 years old, older than Angie, and in good health. The doctor said it was a hidden illness and they couldn't say exactly what caused it. The funeral was over, friends and family went back to their business, and it was time to grieve. Billy, Sarah, Sherry's mom, and I lived with her for about 2 weeks. She didn't start to come to life until the end of the second week. We had a little hiccup when the will was read, mostly because that gave it finality. When he updated the will, he put some letters in it. It was his way of saying goodbye to those he loved. Angie received one of them. To this day, I never asked, and she never told me what was in it. One he left for Billy to open on his 18th birthday. One thing he left for me, too. Dear Will, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I want to thank you for your friendship. You took a stiff Yankee lawyer and made him a better man who could relax more and appreciate what he had. I was honored to be your friend. I left something for Billy. It's a college fund, enough for a full tuition. I know you can afford it, but it felt good to do it for him and for you. He's a great kid. I'm sure if he follows your guidance, he'll be a better man. I hope he will remember me fondly. Now for the serious part. Take care of her, Will. She'll need you for a while. I know you loved her, and true to your honor and our friendship, you did nothing to hurt her. Angie needs someone to love her right now to help her through the dark times ahead. I'm sorry I won't be around. I'd like to see Billy as a man. You have to find someone on your own before you give up. Thank you for being who you are and for the friend I need. Ben. Of course, most of his possessions, the farm, the investments, had gone to Angie. He left the dirt track he loved so much and a lot of money to install new, safer bleachers and an announcer's booth and a better public address system. The track was renamed in his honor. For a whole year, Angie tried to find a normal life, but finally gave up. I'm moving to Philadelphia for a while. I can't be here. Everywhere I look, I see his ghost. Even though he was 10 years old, Billy cried for 2 days. I shed tears in private. She had been my anchor for 8 years. I had never felt so lost and alone. She gave us the keys and asked us to look after the farm. I would come every 2 or 3 weeks, start her little tractor and drive it around a bit to keep it in good mechanical condition, and walk around the house checking the lights and plumbing. She left the electricity on and installed a state-of-the-art security system. I continued to live my life focusing on Billy. He was at the age where he wanted to socialize with his friends, and I knew he would soon leave me behind. Our house became a center for boys. There were always at least 3 of his best buddies in the house. I made sure I knew them and their parents well, inviting them to visit several times and talking to them when they picked up their kids. Several of the mothers were divorced, and I dated 1 or 2, but nothing serious. They wanted more, especially one. I was still in good shape, owned everything without exception, and had 2 successful businesses. I opened a franchise restaurant and now had 4 restaurants scattered all over the state. Each had at least 3 trucks to service small towns. I was making a lot of money. I found another small town that needed equipment and opened another store. Myra's husband became the manager, and her husband was finally able to stop entertaining his boss unless they both wanted to. Sherry lost business. She was no longer getting lucrative offers on equipment rentals like she used to. Her chef quit to run his own business, and she lost more and more business until she was forced to close the establishment. She became an office manager for a large insurance company and married an attorney. This lasted 18 months and he caught her cheating. She continues to work and is now engaged. I hope it's for the long haul. She still sees Billy, mostly on holidays and birthdays. I was tired. I was working out of town opening a new restaurant, my 6th. Sarah was staying with Billy while I traveled, and they both stood there smirking. What? I looked down to see if my fly was unzipped. We have a guest. Come in. It was Angie. She flew into my arms, hugging and crying. She called us, or we called her at least once a month. I could hear the sadness in her voice. I always ended the call with a request to come home. We missed her. She kept saying she would think about it. I asked her how long she planned to stay here. Hopefully another 30 or 40 years. I'm home, Will, and I don't plan on leaving. I'm tired of going to the park to look at the grass, and I'm tired of living next to people I don't know at all and have no interest in being neighbors. I want to see stars instead of smog when I look up at the sky at night. She took my hand. And I want to see you every day. And Billy, I can't believe how big he is. I bet he'll be taller than you when he stops growing. I want to see Myra, the guys from the driving range, all my real friends. By then, she was crying on my shoulder. I just hugged her and felt happy for the first time in almost 2 years. We got her house in order. She looked aged and out of shape, but she was getting fitter every week, riding her favorite tractor and tending her garden. Her youth returned to her. Sarah moved into a nursing home, renting a 1-bedroom apartment. It was close to home. She was surprised one day when she was moved out of that apartment and into a larger 1-bedroom apartment. She was even more surprised when I asked her to send me all the bills. She protested, but I stopped her. I also funded her checking account regularly. There have been times when Billy and I really needed you and you pulled out. This is payback. You should have a bigger apartment so Billy can spend weekends with you. And a happy grandmother is what he needs. End of conversation. We had dinner together every night he didn't spend with his buddies, either at my house or hers. 3 months passed and we started dating. Movies, concerts, even a little dancing. She visited Ben's old firm and left in tears. They made sure to invite us to all their events. She denied that we were dating, saying we were just old friends. Everything came to a head as we sat on the porch swing and watched Billy and his friends race around the field on four-wheeled motorcycles. It was a little chilly, and we snuggled up against each other, covering ourselves with a light blanket. I stopped rocking and looked into her eyes. "Marry me." "What?" "Marry me. I've loved you for years. You love me, but you won't admit it. Let's stop playing musical houses and settle down." Tears ran down her cheeks. "But our age. Look, I know you're 50. You know I'm 43. Listen to me. I don't care, I don't care, I don't care. I love you and I will love you until the day I die." She swayed, wheezed. "This is an ultimatum. Marry me, or I swear on Ben's memory I'll never set foot on this earth again. Yes or no, right now." She stopped talking. I cried, thinking about what I had lost. I was halfway to the porch when she grabbed me. We rolled down the steps and Billy rushed over to us. He helped a crying Angie up. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, honey, I just got some good news. In a few days or weeks, I'm officially going to be your mom. I hope that makes you happy." That day, I realized what an extraordinary child I'd raised. "You've pretty much always been my mom. Now I can say it out loud. I love you, Mom." The wedding and subsequent party had been talked about for years. Myra did her best. We were married in the spring, outdoors, in a meadow on a farm. The reception venue was the castle marquee. Most of Ben's old friends from his firm were gathered there. Sophie was visiting her parents and had come too. She kissed Angie and told her how lucky she was. I realized from the look in her eyes that I was going to have some explaining to do. The guys at the track restored her car and gave it to her as a wedding present. The years flew by in happiness and harmony. Billy graduated from college, got married, and he and his wife went into business. We gave them my old house as a wedding gift after it was completely remodeled. They gave us 3 grandchildren. He named his son Bennett. I saw her fall into melancholy sometimes, and I knew she was thinking of him. On their 50th wedding anniversary, I gave her an oil portrait of him painted by a famous artist. She went to bed and cried for 2 hours. We hung the portrait over the fireplace. It looks solemn, and I know my eyes aren't as good as they used to be, but in the evening, with the fire burning and Angie sitting on the floor playing with our littlest granddaughter, I could swear he's smiling. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.